My name is Jake. I grew up with just my mother after my parents divorced when I was young. Mom had a chronic illness, and although she worked, full-time employment was difficult for her due to her condition, so she could only manage a few hours of part-time work. Since there was no child support from my father, we had to live on my mother's salary alone, leading to a very impoverished lifestyle. Yet, I was happy just to be with her. Our meals were modest, especially for a growing boy, but sharing them with her was enjoyable, and we never lacked smiles. Wanting to ease her burden, I decided to start working right after graduating from middle school, despite her objections due to her chronic illness. When Mom asked me about high school during exam season, I told her, "I'm not going to high school, I'll work." She raised her voice, which was unusual for her. "Go to high school. Don't worry about the money," she said while crying. Seeing her like that made me waver for a moment, but I said, "I'm not that smart, and I think I can be more helpful by working. You've done so much for me. Now I want to do my part. I'm like this because of my health," she said, tears streaming down her face. "That's not it. I want to work at my own volition. It's not because of your health. Please don't cry. Let's have a happy meal time like we always do," I reassured her. As I headed to the kitchen, I heard her say, "Thank you, I'm so proud of you," and I had to hold back my tears. My middle school teacher, Mr. Thompson, opposed the idea of me working right after middle school, saying, "Your mother will be saddened." But when I firmly said, "I've discussed it with my mother and she understands," even Mr. Thompson had to relent. Honestly, finding a company that would hire a middle school graduate was challenging. Most companies required at least a college degree, and I couldn't even get an interview. That's when Mr. Thompson said, "A company owned by an acquaintance of mine is looking for sales staff. They're interested in interviewing someone with determination, even if they're a middle school graduate." Before he could finish, I blurted out, "Yes, please, I'll do it. Please arrange the interview." Then, wearing an oversized suit, I went with my mother to the company Mr. Thompson introduced us to. The HR person, seeing how nervous I was, laughed and said, "Don't be so tense. I've heard about your character from Mr. Thompson. You've got guts and don't get easily discouraged, right? We'd love to have you work for us," and I was immediately offered the job. Turns out, they had never hired a middle school graduate before, but Mr. Thompson had been persuading them for weeks to take an interest in me. Mr. Johnson, the company president, gave the green light, thinking I could bring a new perspective to the company. Mom, listening beside me, tearfully expressed her gratitude over and over. "I'll work my hardest. Thank you for this opportunity," I said, standing up and showing respect. The HR team said, "The job might be tough, but it's also rewarding. Let's work hard together," and we shook hands. When I called Mr. Thompson to tell him the good news, I could hear him crying over the phone. I almost cried myself, but managed to hold it in. On graduation day, Mr. Thompson said, "Maybe I shouldn't be doing this for just one student, but don't give up, keep going," and gave me a blue tie and a silver tie pin as a gift. Wearing that gift on my first day at work, I felt like Mr. Thompson was pushing me forward, my spine straightening with confidence. Time flew, and it's been 5 years since I started working at this company. In the beginning, I made mistakes every day, having never done sales or even part-time work before, and got scolded by my manager. But thanks to my colleagues, I became good at teaching others. Being close in age to the new graduates, I was adept at providing empathetic training. My manager noticed and often assigned me to train new employees. In the spring of my 6th year at the company, Mr. Johnson handed over the reins to his daughter. Although he was still young enough to continue, he decided to step down, saying, "My ideas and ways of working are outdated. The next generation should shape the future." After retiring, I heard through the grapevine that Mr. Johnson and his wife moved abroad to enjoy a leisurely life. His daughter, Emily, who became the president, had previously managed a regional sales office after graduating from college and had rapidly grown its performance. Her motto as president was to provide efficient and accurate services, leveraging her sales expertise. Emily took an interest in me as soon as she came to our company. She was probably just curious about me, being the youngest employee there. Whenever we met at work, she would strike up a conversation, and one day, she said, "Let's exchange contact information for future purposes," and we did. After that, she would contact me daily. The messages ranged from simple good mornings and good nights to work discussions, but mostly they were just casual chats. Then one day, she said, "I've been interested in you since the first time I saw you. Would you like to date me?" So, I started dating her. At first, I was skeptical, wondering why Emily would choose me, given the many other potential partners out there. Still, she was incredibly beautiful, and I gradually found myself drawn to her charm. At work, Emily was totally a business person, but with me, she was sweet and affectionate, which made her all the more endearing. I felt privileged that she showed her true self to me. We kept our relationship quiet, known only to a few, and mostly spent time together at my apartment or went out of town. It was like being any other couple, holding hands, enjoying meals together, and spending time at my apartment. This was the first time I truly loved someone other than Mom. After a few months of dating Emily, suddenly, she stopped contacting me. At work, she wouldn't even greet me, seemingly avoiding me. One day, I saw her confronting a superior, asking, "Why did you hire a middle school graduate?" right in front of me. Looking back, her behavior had changed since she met my mother. Emily had insisted on meeting Mom, and although I thought it was too early for such things, I agreed. We had reserved a restaurant near my family home, and initially, the mood was pleasant as we enjoyed our meal and conversation. However, I remember how Emily became noticeably less talkative after Mom mentioned he started working right after graduating from middle school to support me. On the way back, we hardly spoke. Thinking she was feeling unwell, I suggested, "Should we just go back to your place today?" Normally, she would insist on staying longer with me, but this time, she simply agreed, "Okay," and left in a hurry. Reflecting back, even when I offered to take her home because I was worried, she just said, "It's okay," and left as if she was escaping. Now I realize that Emily changed her attitude after learning I was a middle school graduate. From that day on, she frequently visited the sales department, watching the employees as if monitoring them. If she knew I was around, she would make snide remarks like, "The presence of a middle school graduate even dulls the atmosphere." About a week later, I was called to the president's office. "Why are your sales so poor compared to others?" Interrogated like this by Emily, I began to explain, "I've been focusing on training new recruits," but she cut me off and said, "It's impossible for a middle school graduate like you to train new people. If you have time for such meaningless tasks, focus on your own work. You can only teach newcomers if you are competent yourself. Understand, you need to meet this quota by next month." Hearing this, I was speechless as I looked at the document she handed me. It was filled with sales targets that even the top performers had never achieved before. "That's impossible in a month," I protested. "If you have time to train newcomers, you should be able to do it, right?" Emily said with a sly smile. That day, after work, I felt like my spirit was completely broken. My colleagues tried to encourage me, and my manager, who knew the situation, said he would talk to Emily on my behalf. But having lost all my energy, I submitted my resignation to her the very next day. "As expected, this is the fate of an incompetent middle school graduate," she said, and I left her office, trying not to cry. As I was gathering my things to leave the company, my manager stopped me. "Sorry I couldn't do anything for you," he apologized repeatedly. And then he said this. He asked Emily why she was so insistent on making me resign. because he was not satisfied with her attitude towards me. She was initially reluctant to speak, but opened up after he threatened to report the matter to the former president. She had once been in a serious relationship with someone she considered marrying, but they drifted apart due to her busy work schedule and eventual infidelity, leading to a breakup. That past love had been a middle school graduate. Despite having worked hard in school, attending good high schools and universities, and dating men with educational backgrounds, she felt deeply hurt and betrayed by that relationship, leading her to distrust people with a middle school education. Since I was a middle school graduate, she saw me as the same type as her former lover. To her, I was an enemy. Hearing this, I felt a twinge of sympathy. Emily might have lost a significant part of her life to a grand romance, but I was different from her past lover. The idea that one bad experience could lead someone to label all middle school graduates as unworthy or to think they all behave the same way seemed rather unfortunate to me. A year has passed since then. I switched jobs to a company introduced to me by a friend. When I decided to leave my previous job, and when my new job was confirmed, I informed Mr. Thompson, my former teacher. When I quit, he offered me words of encouragement over the phone, though I could hear the sadness in his voice. But when I told him about my new job, he was overjoyed and even sent me a navy blue tie to mark my new beginning. I couldn't bring myself to tell Mom the truth, so I lied and said I was headhunted. She probably knew I was lying but didn't ask any questions. On the first day at my new job, she cooked a special meal and made sandwiches for me. Actually, I was introduced to about 3 companies by my friend. All of them had good conditions and were willing to hire me despite my middle school education. Among them, I was particularly impressed by Mr. Carter of the company I ended up joining. I met Mr. Carter at a cafe on the day of our interview, which was arranged by my friend. We arrived at the cafe earlier than the scheduled time. Mr. Carter and I had agreed on a meeting time, but even after 5 minutes past that time, he hadn't arrived. My friend, knowing him to be punctual, worriedly wondered, he's usually right on time. I wonder if something happened, and was about to make a call. Just then, an elderly man hurried to our table, wiping sweat from his brow, and said, "I'm so sorry for being late." My friend said, "Mr. Carter, we were worried. It's rare for you to be late." Mr. Carter apologized, saying, "I'm really sorry. I ran into a bit of trouble on the way here. I'm Brad Carter," and handed me his business card. He looked familiar to me, and I tried to remember where I had seen him before. While walking to the cafe, I was chatting with my friend. On the way, my friend's phone rang, and as he talked, I walked along, wondering, what kind of person is Mr. Carter? My attention was inexplicably drawn to an elderly man and an old lady at a police station. The elderly man was making eye contact with the old lady, while a police officer nearby was talking to someone on the phone. Shortly after, a family member of the old lady rushed into the station and kept expressing gratitude to the elderly man. I thought maybe he helped the lost old lady, but didn't think much of it at the time. I asked him, "Were you by any chance at the police station earlier?" He replied, "Yes, I was. An old lady was having trouble finding her way home. I had to meet you guys, but I couldn't just leave her there. Sorry about that," he said, slightly embarrassed. During our conversation, I felt strongly that I wanted to work under him. As our meeting was coming to an end, I eagerly said, "I'd like to work for you, Mr. Carter." He laughed like a child and said, "You beat me to it. I was planning to scout you myself. Please, join us. We need someone like you at our company," and thus, my employment was decided on the spot. Having experience in sales, I quickly became a key player in my new workplace. One day during a break, I checked my phone and saw a massive number of missed calls. I felt a chill as the same number called again. Hesitantly, I answered, "Hello." It was Emily. I had deleted her number when I left the company and honestly didn't remember it, so I didn't recognize the number. It's been a while. Are you doing well? I was waiting for you to contact me, but you didn't, so I called," she said. Continuing, she said in a tone as if expecting a reconciliation, "You're so stubborn. I'm not mad anymore. Why don't you come back?" I felt cold hearing Emily's voice, talking like an ex-lover wanting to get back together. "I've moved on to another company, so I'll be going now," I said, trying to end the call. But Emily interrupted me. "Wait a minute. You liked our company and didn't really want to leave, right? I'm not mad anymore, so stop being stubborn and come back," she said. Her tone implied she wouldn't let me hang up until I said, "Okay, I'll return to the company." As the afternoon work hours were approaching, I became anxious to end the call. The more I hurried, the harder it was to hang up. As I was feeling troubled, Mr. Carter appeared behind me. "May I take over for a moment?" he asked, and started talking to Emily. After a short while, Mr. Carter said to her, "Are you looking to rekindle a romantic relationship with him, or do you want him back as an employee? It seems like a difficult decision to make between personal and professional matters." Then he continued, "It must be tough for you, Ms. Johnson. It seems like you've lost a big fish, both as an employee and a lover. As for our company, we'd prefer not to poach such a valuable asset." Shortly after, the call ended. Mr. Carter, with a smile, said to me, "I couldn't just stand by when I sensed something was wrong. Sorry for intruding uninvited. I had to give up and hang up because the conversation wasn't going anywhere, but if you get any more calls and find yourself in trouble, let me know." He handed me back my phone with his usual smile. Tears welled up in my eyes, and I expressed my gratitude to Mr. Carter, saying, "Thank you so much." Mr. Carter, seeing my reaction, said, "Protecting our valuable employees is part of my job. Come on, cheer up. How about this?" He handed me a soda, presumably bought from a vendor machine. "I meant to buy orange juice, but accidentally bought this," he said with a slightly embarrassed smile, and we both burst into laughter. Later, I heard from a former colleague at my previous workplace that Emily continued to neglect personnel development and focus solely on improving sales performance. As a result, newcomers kept quitting shortly after joining. In her personal life, desperate to get married, she apparently hoped to rely on me for both a marriage partner and personnel development. However, she gave up after being directly rejected by Mr. Carter. Emily's company soon went bankrupt, and she ended up single with a huge debt. I thought maybe her father, the former president, would help her, but he had heard about her behavior and my situation, and decided not to tolerate such disrespect, even from his daughter, making her take full responsibility. I would never serve a double purpose for her. I felt that Emily's outcome, focused on efficiency, was self-inflicted. At the same time, I realized that my encounter with Emily led to meeting Mr. Carter and helped me grow as a person. I don't wish to meet her again, but I hope in my heart that she will change her ways, reflect, and find a new path. And I aim to be like Mr. Carter, considering others, helping those in trouble or distress, not creating employees who suffer as I did, and nurturing good talents for both the company and society.